What's up? What's happening, folks? Welcome back to the channel, Sports, Life, and Politics TV. I'm Samuel Koppel, YouTube's #1 couch detective, and I'm here for the news. And this is part 2 to the video on Jack Teixeira. When I last left off, I was talking about the race war. You know, there are white people in this country and Hispanics who identify as white who think a race war is a great idea. But it's probably the worst idea for white people in the history of the United States of America, because it would completely destroy everything America has built itself to the world to be. And people think a race war is easy. It's one of the most difficult things you possibly can do. And you will lose all traction around the world. That means that all the stuff that you say you hold and stand true to, and your value system and all that, none of that shit is true. And like I said before, you'd have to hope that God is on your side. But let's continue this video on Jack Teixeira.
Lieberman's at the Pentagon with some new reporting. Oren, you found that there was actually a Pentagon working group formed in 2021 to try to identify members of the military who had extremist views such as Teixeira.
Jake, this, when you look back at it, looks like an effort that was tailor-made to find and detect someone with a supremacist ideology or an extremist ideology, like we're seeing especially in that video from Jack Teixeira, and at least give the military options on how to deal with it. And yet, 2 years later, in speaking with military officials and others familiar with the matter here, this effort was effectively abandoned, even though it had a focus on, for example, training on extremism, insider threat programs, military justice and policy, and more. Again, efforts that seem almost tailor-made to have dealt with a case like this. In fact, when we asked the Pentagon earlier this week where this effort stood, they said that 2 years later, only one of those had been completed, the part on training, while they said the other 5 had people assigned to it. So how did we get to this point? Extremism was one of the first issues Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin tried to deal with when he came in January 2021. This is just several weeks after January 6th. And there was essentially a two-part effort here. One was the Countering Extremist Activity Working Group, and the other was Bishop Garrison, who was put in charge of that group, a black West Point graduate who had served 2 tours in Iraq. But soon after coming into the position, Garrison came under a withering barrage of attack from some Republicans as well as right-wing media for tweets he had posted before coming into this position, critical of former President Donald Trump. And the sources we spoke with essentially...
Yeah, when that black man did that, he was toast. Especially within the military, high-ranking government. A lot of them people like Trump. Especially within law enforcement, West Point, all that type, they like that. They all kind of in agreement on, you know, certain things. Maybe not the way to go about it, but they most definitely, they're in agreement pretty much across the board. So when that black man made them tweets and he came into that position of power, and he wanted to attack extremism in the Pentagon and within the military, from the Pentagon within the military, he was a done dollar. Because you got to realize, even if he had made those tweets, they didn't want him doing that no way. So the tweets was the excuse to make sure he was outed.
Say that the attack was so long that eventually Garrison lost the support of those here in the Pentagon, and not only did he go away, so too did the effort he was working on, Jake.
What happened to these efforts to counter extremist activity within the military?
The Countering Extremist Activity Working Group put out its report in December 2021. It tried to offer a better, more usable, more specific, exact definition of what extremist activity is, but officials we've spoken with say it effectively fell flat. Another source familiar with the matter said it became clear that the Pentagon was going to focus its changes on incremental changes and changes at the margin instead of trying to deal with big changes to this big issue, because it became politically too difficult to deal with, and there were simply other things higher on the agenda. The Afghanistan withdrawal, sexual assault and harassment, preventing suicide.
That's another thing. He said sexual harassment within the military. If you're a woman and you're going into the military, especially in these grunt departments of the Marines and the Army, and you have to be extremely careful as a woman, because this is basically a male-dominated field. And when you throw a woman into that, it's like throwing a woman into a pack of wolves. You have to be, it's a lot of sexual assault that happen within the military That's why they have their own military court. And they have to dole out their own portion of justice. But if you're a woman, that's I don't know. You know, maybe this Coast Guard and maybe the Air Force, but even at that, it's a male-dominated field. So you have to be extremely careful when you're a woman and going to the military, especially if you're good looking. God forbid you pretty. Ain't no telling who gonna be coming on to you. You be one of them goddamn top generals or admirals, or you'd be surprised.
Example, Jake, the key question here: would this have stopped the Shira? One official we spoke with said it's unclear to answer in a specific case, but it may have stopped other Shiras.
CNN Doran Lieberman at the Pentagon Force, thanks so much. Joining us now to discuss this case, CNN Chief Law Enforcement and Intelligence Analyst John Miller and CNN National Security Analyst Julia Fan. John, clearly the judge didn't think Teixeira would keep his word if he were allowed to be released before trial.
Well, I think the judge is looking at a pattern of youthful, irresponsible, immature, and unpredictable behavior. When you see the breadth of this case, the amount of it.
For him to even use the word youthful, we don't know fuck about no youthful shit. You're a grown ass man. That's a grown man. I'm not saying he's, a 40-year-old man, but he's grown. And if you commit a crime, they can try you as an adult because you're 20. I think say he's 22 or 23 years old. Are you kidding me? Yeah, fuck, I don't give a damn about none of that youthful shit.
Youthful, irresponsible, immature, and unpredictable behavior.
And the way he phrased all that, he made it like he was at high school and he put firecrackers in a locker. You know what I mean? Like it's just some shit he did. And, like it was just a small thing that he did. He was youthful and, he... the way they phrase some of the wording, I always find it amusing. And they keep doing it over and over again. But this is a grown man who did this.
I think the judge is looking at a pattern of youthful, irresponsible, immature, and unpredictable behavior. When you see the breadth of this case, the amount of material leaked, the sheer sensitivity of the material leaked, the high classification of the material leaked, and look, it makes sense on paper. He's got roots in the community. He's got a mom and dad who love him, who live in the neighborhood. They're going to watch him at home.
Let me say this. Fuck his mom and dad. They did a fucking terrible job. I think his dad is ex-military. He comes from a military family. They did a god-awful job with this boy. He's an incel who sits around and plays video games and talk about racist shit all day. Jack Teixeira ain't shit. And his parents aren't shit. They raised this little monster, spoiled him rotten. He was able to probably escape through school and all these type of different circumstances and situations because who his family was. Then he gets in there, and then when they ask him about such and such, he just yells out, he don't give a fuck. Yeah, fuck him.
An ankle monitor. They would be responsible for him. He's actually not a bad case for bail, as Magistrate Hennessy said. But we all know the story of Edward Snowden, who, when he had the chance to escaped to a hostile foreign power, Russia, with all the secrets he had and those in his head, which all could be shared with them. So I think this is a risk-reward matter for the magistrate, where he just said there's too much here to risk it.
And Juliet, back to what Oren just reported, you used to work at the Department of Homeland Security. Is it even possible to vet government officials for extremist views?
It would be very hard, and you have to do. We just don't have the resources to do that kind of social media search or the dark web search or even the gaming search that we see. And in this case, look, with the Pentagon.
She lying. She lying. That's a lie. They have algorithms that can catch that shit just through certain phrases, words, websites, writings, psychological behavior, all type of shit they can do that will catch you without even a human being even being involved. She's a liar. I've seen her on the news before. This lady's a pathological liar, allegedly. But I've seen her on TV before, and she will get on here and lie at the drop of a hat. Oh, it's too difficult to try to find out who's who. Lady, They have algorithms that catch shit with ease at this point.
Very hard. I mean, you have to do. We just don't have the resources to do that kind of social media search or the dark web search or even the gaming search we see. And in this case, look, what the Pentagon won't say is that they've got a recruitment problem in terms of their numbers. We are falling short, and so that means that they need to get people on board faster than maybe a more rigorous review will allow. So you just have that tension between recruitment and then, of course, radicalization. But I will say, looking at this case, and in many of these cases, this is a command staff problem. One mistake may be, I'm just looking at the wrong stuff. 2 reprimands, as we know he's already had, is something weird is going on with this guy. By the 3rd, when the disciplinary officer says, why is he looking at things he shouldn't be looking at? Like, red alarm should be going off at that stage. So I really view this as a command staff problem.
100% a red alarm should have been going off. He gave away every clue that, like, like you watch old movies, or not old movies, or maybe like a TV show or a movie, and a person within the government is spying for another country. They are in the United States government. They stealing secrets. They do everything in their power to keep everything concealed, to hide. He did all the opposite. So that's what makes this case so strange.
As much as a recruitment problem.
John, the memos show.
And let me say this had nothing to do with recruitment. Nothing. He comes from a military family and a military background. I don't know why she keeps talking about a recruitment problem. Obviously, the United States military do have a recruitment problem, but this case has nothing to do with that.
Officers believed he was, quote, potentially ignoring a cease and desist order he was given last September to stop deep diving into intelligence. So it's not like they weren't aware that this was a potential problem. It's pretty egregious. Why? Why didn't they take more serious action?
So the why there, we don't have the answer to, but the why there is the answer to why is the commanding officer of that air base in Cape Cod on ice right now? Why is the executive officer on ice too? Why has that base been shut down from its intelligence collection and dissemination missions? Because
who else was leaking classified documents out of that base? That's another question. Who in the hell else?
The Air Force and the Pentagon realized this was not a place that was operating under controls. As Juliet hit it on the head, any one of those 3 things should have been a referral to the base security officer and then a referral to OSI, the Office of Special Investigations of the Air Force, to say, why is our techie, the guy who's supposed to make sure everything stays plugged in and the systems are running, why is he reading intelligence that has nothing to do with his job? Why is he showing up at a briefing and asking pointed strategic questions about an operation that are very specific? Why is he making notes from classified documents?
He was doing everything to get caught. Everything he was doing to get caught. But yet, it took all this time to figure out what was going on. And they knew the whole time, basically. That's the moral of the story.
Should have been enough to say, we're putting you on ice, and we're going to have some serious questions about where did those notes go? What were they for? Where did you put them? And then the deep dive into his social media and into the rest of it. All of that should have happened way before this stumbled into the public arena.
Yeah, no doubt about that. There's no doubt about that. This case is absurd to the umpteenth degree. And that whole damn base was dirty as hell and rotten to the core. That's why the whole thing was shut down. But, I just wanted to go over that clip. That was part 2 to the Jack Teixeira. I guarantee you there's going to be something else to come out about this. It's just going to be mind-boggling and mind-blowing. There's no doubt about that. He was dealing in real-life war games. But this has been Sports, Life, and Politics TV. I'm Samuel Koppel, YouTube's #1 couch detective. I'm here for the news. Hit that like. Hit that subscribe. I just took your ass on a Jack Teixeira. Didn't give a fuck ride. Peace.